Now, I will talk about some basics of fire and fire prevention protection system. So, everyone knows that fire is very hazardous to properties, and it's a chemical process in which there is a combination of one or more substance with oxygen, and this process being capable of producing heat and light. And fire starts when a combustible material is heated to a higher temperature in the presence of oxygen. And fire triangle, which we already explained, and any one of this, whether when it is not available, so there will not be any fire happening. That's why it's important to understand this fire triangle. Fuel for fire, it is classified into class A, B, C and D. Class A is basically wood and paper, cloth, trash, plastics, which we generally see in the places. Class B is flammable liquids like oil, acetone, like that. Class C is electrical fire, and class D is metal fire, basically from potassium, sodium, aluminum, magnesium, like that. So, the sources of ignitions are like flames, then welding and cutting, mechanical sparks, chemical energy, vehicles, self-heating or spontaneous ignition, static electricity, electrical equipment, radiation. So, we need to have a careful look or inspection about is there any sources of ignition present in the shop floor which can give rise to fire. And now, when it comes to firefighting and extinguishment, there are three methodology with which fire extinguishing is happening. One is cooling, and then second one is blanketing, the third one is starvation. Cooling is actually you reduce the impact of the heat source, and blanketing is actually cut the oxygen levels, and starvation is like cut the fuel source, so that the fire will starve for the fuel and then get extinguished. So, different types of fire extinguishers like media, like water, foam, dry chemical, carbon dioxide, halon, and the type of effect, for example, water is having a cooling effect, and then foam will have a blanketing effect, dry chemical powder will again have a blanketing effect, carbon dioxide will have a blanketing effect. So, these fires are like water is effective only for A class fires, whereas dry chemical powder is effective for B class as well as C class fires. So, that is why this matrix will try and help out how to help in extinguishing the fire. Then methods of fire prevention, every time we need to use flame proof equipment in the area, then control hazardous static charges, then use different types of safety interlocks in the equipment. Work permit system is something which is an administrative control that that helps us to have a check on the hot work and thereby resulting into fire, and no smoking policy which is to be adapted in the plant in hazardous area. Mobiles are to be not to be permitted in the case of in the area of flammable storage. Double earthing, dike walls, flame arresters, all these methods, all these tools will help us to mitigate the risk of fire. Now, when it comes to prevention, we should have smoke detection system at various places which can help us to early detection of fire. Then manual call point, when an employee or any person who actually watches the fire, he can immediately alert using this manual call point, which will give rise to alarms with the help of hooters. And emergency communication system is very, very important, because speakers at various places, a single announcement will alert all the people about the fire. And hydrant system, which is necessary for firefighting, and there are different types of paraphernalia available for fire hydrant. It's a single hydrant system, then double hydrant system. Then fire prevention extinguishment, we have nozzles which are used in fire fighting, and there are ordinary nozzles, multi-purpose nozzles, then portable foam trolley. These are all different ways and means of firefighting prevention and extinguishment is being carried out. And foam pourer system is there, medium tank yard which can be connected to fire hydrant system. Foam trolley, which is about some 1500 liters, will be enough for a plant. So, and water sprinkler system is another important thing, and then basically solvent areas, monomer tanks, all those things can be connected with sprinkler system and hydrant system. And CO2 flooding is another auto extinguishing system available in the market, which will be helpful without personal intervention. That itself, when identified, it will extinguish the fire. And these are all general firefighting equipments. Then dry chemical powders in various quantities available, and then CO2 extinguishing, which is especially very helpful in electrical control rooms and all for fighting fire. And mechanical foam fire extinguishers, another important thing when it comes to flammable fires. Then fire buckets are is mandatory thing which is to be kept in many areas. Then when we try to fight the fire, breathing apparatus, because in that area it will be abundant in CO2, so less amount of oxygen. So self-contained breathing apparatus is very necessary for firefighters when they go and do the firefighting. And then fire proximity suit to mitigate the risk of burn injuries when somebody is going to fight the fire. And now we talk about material safety data sheet. When it comes to chemical safety, it is very important to have a material safety data sheet. Basically, it's a comprehensive data sheet, universally accepted, spelling out all details about the material. It will provide information on material details, safe handling and storage and transportation, and preventive measures in case of exposures. And it throws extensive details on chemical identity and formula, physical and chemical data, fire and explosion hazard data, then reactivity data, health hazard, preventive measures in firefighting, first aid measures. All those things are contained in MSDS. And now we will talk about basic first aid. Basically, first aid is an emergency care and treatment of a sick or injured person before he is shifting to a professional medical service. And first aid measures are not meant to replace proper medical diagnosis and treatment. So it stands as a first aid, and it's initial care. And there is a difference between medical aid. Medical aid is treatment by a doctor and registered nurse or ambulance officer, but first aid is a initial care which can be done by any trained first aider. So the purpose is to save life, prevent further injury, and to minimize or prevent infection. So general rules are, while giving first aid, lying down position unless another way is indicated, and special care for head and neck injury, and semi-sitting position for difficulty. If you have breathing difficulty, semi-sitting or position will be good, and head turned to side for vomiting and bleeding around the mouth, and head in low position for shock. Then loosen the restrictive clothing and do not touch and open wounds or burns with your fingers or unsterile objects. Do not give anything to eat or drink at the time of first aid. When transporting, feet should be first at the time of shifting the patient. Now there is something called as ABC, which is very vital for first aid. A means airway. To a patient, when we are trying to give the first aid, airway is very important. And then to maintain and check breathing, and then maintain the circulation. So this is what it is known as ABC rule of first aid. And when it comes to shock, lay the patient on his back, then stop bleeding if any, then relieve the pain by supporting injured part. Keep the patient comfortable but not hot. Do not cause any kind of sweating. Fluids may be given in small amounts unless the patient is nauseated, unconscious, likely to be operated on. And reassure and cheer up the patient. So when it comes to shock, this is the first aid that is prescribed. And when it comes to abdominal wounds, no time should be lost. Keep the patient flat. Do not give anything by mouth. Maintain the warmth. Then always apply sterile dressing and binder as for wounds. Provide careful and immediate transportation to the hospital. When it comes to eye wounds, removal may be attempted if foreign body is not embedded. Do not apply oil or any kind of an ointment. If there is a foreign body embedded in the eyeball, send the worker immediately to the doctor after applying pad and loose bandage. And chemical burns of the eye, immediate washing of the eye at least 15 minutes. This is very important, chemical burns, which is quite common in factories. And apply sterile bandage and send the worker immediately to the doctor. Neutralizing agents or ointments should be used. And in terms of suffocation, remove the patient from the source of danger, make a rapid examination to ensure that the air passage are free and clean, and restore natural breathing by artificial respiration if breathing has ceased. Electrical shock, remove the patient from the source of danger, make a rapid examination to ensure that air passages are free, clean and clean them if necessary, restore natural breathing by artificial respiration if breathing has ceased. Now, kind of insensibility, immediately send for the doctor if possible. Where the patient face is pale, lay him flat and face downwards with his head turned to one side. If his face blushed or blue, raise and support the head and shoulders. Control any serious bleeding and loosen any tight clothing and let him have plenty of air. Do not give anything by mouth. So, this is what for insensibility. For burns, we have to act quickly and put the affected part in the cold water and pour water over burns that cannot be immersed, and cover the affected area with a sterilized dressing. In terms of snake bite, calm and reassure the patient, immobilize the bitten limb by splinting it, wash and cool the wound with soap water. Soap water is very important. Do not cut, rub or suck the bite. Take to a doctor. Press hard over the wound for 15 minutes. Do not remove cloth if it has been placed. So, this we talked about first aid cases. Now, when it comes to safety, safety is basically everyone's responsibility, and we need to work safe in the factory, in any industries for that matter, understand the hazards and identify the hazards and understand the risk, and use the proper controls like elimination of the risk, substitution of the risk with a less hazardous material, and proper engineering controls, then administrative control, trained people for the job, and wearing the personal protective equipment as required. Because remember, your family members are waiting for you at your home. Be very safe and act safe at your workplace. Thank you.